My name is Hazel, and this week we're going to be thinking about God's promise to us for our protection. Now, often I think when we think of God's protection, often we just first think of God's protection for our physical being. I think I do this quite a lot with my children, so we might pray for God's protection on a long journey. Or if we're facing a dangerous situation, or for illness. I'm sure that many of us have prayed many times during the last 8 months or so for God's protection for our family and our friends and ourselves with the current pandemic. Last week, I stupidly cut my hand quite badly and ended up in A&E for 3 hours. And I definitely prayed for God's protection. For me, when I went in, there was big yellow posters saying, "Stop if you have these symptoms of the winter vomiting bug," or obviously corona. And I definitely sat and prayed for my protection against these other illnesses, that I wouldn't get them whilst I was sat waiting to have my hand glued back together. And I've definitely felt God's protection on my physical being during my open heart surgery last year and my recovery. I know that God was watching over me during the surgery, and He kept me safe. However, we know that we live in a fallen world, and just because we're under God's care, it doesn't stop storms from happening. So today, what I really want to focus on is God's protection for our emotional and our spiritual beings. So over the last few weeks, the weather has changed. It has got a lot colder, and we've had to retreat into the protection of our homes against the wind and the rain. In our house, that has meant that we've had to bring the guinea pigs inside as well. So they've come indoors in order to be kept safe. And this has really got me thinking about God's protection for us and how He wants to keep us safe from those storms, and He wants to be our refuge and our hiding place and our strong tower during those stormy times. So there's many different storms that we might face. There's the physical and mental illness, there's relationship difficulties, there's financial struggles, there's issues at work, there's many different situations and that we can face, and often more than one at a time. But in all of these times, God is watching over us and waiting to give us rest and comfort and strength to face them. He wants to protect us during these times. He wants to keep us safe. So I've already mentioned my open heart surgery last year and God's protection on me physically. And although my physical recovery went smoothly, I was left struggling with symptoms of depression and anxiety. And I really had to seek God's refuge in those times and God's strength in order to overcome those feelings, which were quite overwhelming sometimes. And I didn't know how I was going to get back to feeling normal. But I found that God very gently was waiting for me to give me that kind of strength and peace to face those struggles. So in a recent leadership team meeting, Daniel reminded us that during this current pandemic, we are all in the same storm of the COVID-19 pandemic, but we all have very different boats. And he showed us a picture of a kind of big storm coming and waves coming, and all these different boats in it. So there was an army ship, and there was sailing boats and yachts, and there was even this tiny little canoe. And it was kind of this analogy that we're in the same storm, but everybody's in a different position and be experiencing it in a different way. But what I was reflecting on is that all of those boats, that whatever form they are in, they are still protecting the people in the boat from that storm, from the waves. And that's kind of like God's protection for us. It can come in different ways and different formats. And it comes when we need it, and when we how we need it, and when we ask for it. So in the Bible, in the book of Psalms, there's many different scriptures on verses on God's promise of protection for us, and many different examples of when people have requested God's protection. David mainly requested God's protection. So there's too many for me to read out or list here, but you could look some up. So some examples might be in Psalm 91, Psalm 138, Psalm 46, and my kind of go-to Psalm 123. But what I did want to do was read a bit of Psalm 27 with you, which Psalm 27 verses 1 to 6. So it says, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked advance against me to devour me, it is my enemies and my foes who will stumble and fall. Though an army besiege me, my heart will not fear. Though war break out against me, even then I will be confident. One thing that I ask for the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and to seek him in his temple. For in the day of trouble he will keep me safe in his dwelling. He will hide me in the shelter of his sacred tent and set me high upon a rock. Then my head will be exalted above the enemies who surround me. At his sacred tent I will sacrifice with shouts of joy, and I will sing and make music to the Lord." So I pray for you today that whatever storms you are in, whatever troubles you are going through, that you will seek and feel and know God's refuge, God's strength, God's protection, and that even in those troubled times, you will be able to shout of joy and give praise in his name. Thank you for watching, and I really hope you have a great day.